Everyone in the arena now thought they understood why the ref hadn't stepped in. It must have been due to the knowledge he had known beforehand. The ref must have known that the student had a powerful regeneration ability, but the truth of the matter was that the ref was just as shocked as everyone else. He had been informed beforehand that the student had a transformation ability. The audience members were too far away, and the screen never focused long enough for them to tell what level Peter's wristwatch had shown. They all just knew he must have had a powerful regeneration ability, and now it made sense why they had allowed him to fight in the tournament. However, the participants knew differently, having seen not only his level, but the number of guards that were always around him. Is he some type of mutant, they thought? Now, as for Jack, who was sitting in the booth, he wasn't upset by this sudden change and surprise. Instead, he was excited but at the same time concerned, since he was thinking along the same lines as the students. He had gotten so excited that he stood up from his seat. This has to be the doing of Pure, he thought. Duke had already confirmed he had a transformation ability, and before that, there had been reports of him having an Earth ability. Have Pure finally managed to create a monster? For years, organizations and different research institutes had dabbled in the possibility of allowing a student to have more than one ability. Due to the human cell's structure, it seemed impossible, but they progressed onward. To Jack, it seemed like Pure must have been able to finally succeed in creating a body that was able to have more than one ability. He might even be more important to them than I first thought. Knowing this new piece of information, Jack was determined to continue his plan of luring out Pure. He was unsure whether or not they had made more people like Peter, but even if they hadn't, they would hate the idea of the military getting their hands on something they had yet to discover. You hypocritical bastards, he thought as he sat back down in his seat. The crowd continued to cheer away, and now the students were keeping a closer eye on the match than before. Did I miss much? A voice from behind Layla said. Quinn? She replied. It looked like Quinn had returned and was in one piece, which meant he must have dealt with the problem. Layla gulped when she thought of the possibility of getting rid of that problem. So, what happened? Is Cia? She couldn't finish her sentence for fear of the answer she would hear back. She's alive, but it's complicated, he replied. Pulling off Layla to one side, he decided it was best to explain the full details of what had happened as soon as possible, especially since this involved her. Back at the hotel lobby place, around the corner where the elevators were located, Quinn was alone with Cia. When Quinn had activated his influence skill, her eyes had hollowed out, and it looked like his skill had worked. Before it looked like it had nearly worked, and now, with his charm points increased, it seemed to just be enough to push her over the edge. Not wanting to waste this golden opportunity, Quinn decided it would be best to ask her some simple questions. He had tried asking her what Pure was planning to do at the event. However, he quickly realized that for some reason, any question that was about Pure would be answered with nothing. It was almost scary even to him. Every time he would ask them a question, she would try and search her pocket like an automatic response. Usually, when one was under influence, they would be unable to control anything. There were two things that Quinn could think of as to how this was possible. Either his influence skill was barely working on her, and she was still fighting back, or there was some even stronger type of mind control going on at Pure behind the scenes. Seeing that she repeatedly tried to reach into her pockets, Quinn decided to reach in and grab whatever she was trying to get. Inside one of the pockets, he had discovered a white pill. What its use was for, he did not know. Inside the back pocket, there seemed to be a small white little remote. Afraid it might have been a recorder or something else, Quinn had crushed it to pieces on the spot. It would have been nice to give it to Logan, but he couldn't take any chances, and Layla had also informed him of Cia having something like this beforehand. If he was to find such a thing, he was told to destroy it on the spot. Since Quinn was unable to answer any questions, he feared that perhaps the next part wouldn't have worked either. This was the tricky part. How much did Cia know? Being an agent of Pure, she always had kept an eye on Layla and had been with her from the beginning. If he was only to remove the events from today and the Orange Portal expedition, there was a chance that Pure would be able to fit multiple pieces of the puzzle together. He couldn't risk it. There was only one thing he could do. Erase everything. He only said 2 words, unsure of what it might have done. He had asked the system beforehand, and he said, She would be able to live and talk, so it should be okay, but whether or not she could live a normal life again, he did not know. Removing this much information was considered dangerous. After giving the command, her eyes whitened even further, and then the reflection of red was seen. This was the sign that his command had worked. Not wanting to be there when she came to, Quinn decided to quickly head back out to the others. He turned to look back at her one time before deciding to head off again. A short time had passed, and Cia, who was on the floor, had come to. She lifted herself off the floor with a banging pain in her head. She placed her hand, making sure she wasn't injured, and started looking around at her surroundings. "What is this place?" she asked. Then something had hit her even worse. "Who am I? What's my name?" Cia couldn't remember anything. Not her birth date, not how old she was, or even the fact she was attending military school. The only thing she could remember was how to speak and her normal bodily functions. Realizing this, a natural reaction had occurred as she broke down in tears and screamed out. After hearing everything Quinn had to say, for some reason she felt bad for Cia. She hated Pure, but not Cia herself. Still, she knew it had to be done. Getting rid of her memories would be better than death. At least, that's what she thought. "So, do you know what this pill is?" Quinn asked as he handed it over. "All agents carry one with them. It's poison," Layla explained. "If we were ever caught, and in a situation where we think we might be exposed, we're meant to take it instantly." "That's kind of messed up," Quinn let slip, forgetting for a second that Layla was a part of this messed up organization. "Anyway, do you know what they're planning or what will happen now?" Layla shook her head in response. "I have no clue. My rank in the organization was never high enough, and it seems like they opted to tell me nothing now. My guess is as good as yours." With everything explained, Layla and Quinn decided to return to the rest of the group. They quickly updated Quinn on the events of the fight so far, and he only had one thing he could say in response. "It looks like there's nothing we can do right now apart from one thing." Quinn walked up to the ledge and looked down at the fighting platforms below. He lifted both his hands by his mouth and made a cone shape. Taking in a large deep breath as loud as he could, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Kick his arse until he can no longer walk." It was long distance, and even though his voice was projected very loud, the audience was unable to hear him. But that wasn't important. Quinn only needed one person to hear his words. Walking towards Larry slowly, Peter raised his hand and gave a thumbs up in Quinn's direction. "Now I have permission." After watching the fast-paced regeneration of the student, Silver pretty much confirmed her suspicions. The student that was known as Peter was a Wight. There weren't many things out there with such a fast healing speed. The only other thing that had a similar healing speed was Wendigos, but it was clear that Peter had kept most of his human appearance, so it ruled that possibility out. Now that there weren't as many fights going on, she concentrated and found that there was no heartbeat. All these things led to the conclusion that he was a Wight. This could be a little troublesome or fairly easy to deal with. If the Wight was created by Fex, then it would be impossible for her or him to kill it, and she would have to find some other way to get rid of it. There was no way she could leave now knowing what was out and about. Without a ladder, they could quickly go out of control. If it wasn't created by Fex, then that could be worse. If possible, she would have liked Fex to deal with the situation, as he was able to move about more freely among the students than she could. But if it was created by someone else, and the vampire turned out to be quite powerful, it might be too much for him to handle, and she would, in the end, personally have to deal with it. Whatever the case was, she would keep a close eye on observing the Wight's strength. There was no longer any need for Peter to hold back. The military already thought he was strange after finding out he had several abilities. The worst thing that could happen was that he would need to feed again, and that was the worst outcome. Knowing this and having the element of surprise, Peter continued to walk forward slowly. For some reason, Larry didn't know why, but he felt an immense amount of pressure. It wasn't the fact that Peter was giving out such a feeling. It was because someone who he was sure he had already defeated was now walking perfectly fine. This type of situation messes with one's head, and it didn't quite make sense to Larry. "I beat you up once, I can just do it again," Larry shouted as he tried to psych himself up to go in for the attack. Shouting out a war cry once again, this time the forehands had come out of his back before charging in. The boots on his feet slightly went a bronze color as he activated the equipment, allowing him to move slightly faster. Then, planning to do the same thing as last time, the gauntlets were activated as well. "I'm not taking any chances. I'm taking you down in one blow." Surprisingly, Larry was moving a lot faster than Peter had suspected, but it still wasn't fast enough. Knowing full well he needed to avoid the attacks, at the right time as Larry went for the grab, Peter jumped back, allowing himself to be just out of reach of the grab. With a dash, Peter tried to go around the side, but Larry wasn't going to let him get behind him. One hand retracted from his left side and popped out of the right side, swinging his fist out at the same time. Peter, seeing this, threw a fist of his own, but he wasn't holding back. "You idiot! Maybe you can heal, but you can't match my power," Larry thought. The two fists collided, and to his surprise, their strength was now equal. One fist didn't push back the other, but the power was so strong that the bones in both of their fists were completely shattered. "Ah!" Larry winced in pain and slightly flinched, while Peter hadn't stopped moving. The pain had no effect, and by the time he was around the back of Larry, his fist had already finished healing. "He's so fast. Are you sure he doesn't have the ability of speed as well? How come someone moved that quick?" Sam thought, watching from above. Fex looked over at Quinn and thought back to when he had fought against the king-tier beast. That's his speed, and with the boots, Quinn was even faster than that. If people saw Quinn fight in this event, how would they react to it? "This boy is good," Owen said. "Ignoring the things he's displaying for now, he knows how to use his unique traits to his advantage." At this point, Jack was grinding his teeth. He never expected Peter to be this skillful. He was happy at first when he found out he had the regenerative ability as well as the transformation ability, but this was unexpected. The aim was for him to lose the fight. Larry spun his body around, hoping to slam his gauntlet fist right into Peter's head. With the added strength of the gauntlets, his power should have overpowered Peter's. Seeing this, Peter didn't care to dodge, but instead lifted his left arm right up to his head, while throwing out a punch of his own. In a fight, the best time to throw a punch is when your opponent is throwing a punch of their own. A counterpunch, Nate said, looking at the screen already knowing the outcome of the fight. Larry's fist had hit Peter's arm and had shattered his forearm, but the blow was blocked. In contrast, Peter's strike had all his power behind it, as well as the momentum of Larry's spinning and coming towards him. As Peter's fist dug into his face, it had twice the power of what a punch from Peter would usually have. Parts of teeth went flying out of his mouth, and blood started to gush from his nose. As his head was flung back, the whites of his eyes could be seen, and the loud sound of the heavy body hitting the floor was heard. The ref rushed to the body on the floor and soon raised his hand. "The winner, Zombie P!" The single punch from Peter was all it took. Larry had been defeated. Slamming his fist down on his chair, Jack stood up from his seat and stormed off out of the room. "What's wrong with him? Did he have a bet on the other kid to win?" Mona asked. "Don't be silly," Oscar replied. "You know we don't allow those types of things. I believe he had been paying close attention to Larry for a while now and was planning to invite him into his family. This might have been quite a shock to him. Just leave him be." Outside of the booth, Jack continued to walk down the hallway. He was doing his best to calm down. Pure hadn't come out, and he had spent a lot of time preparing everything, and it seemed to be all a waste of time. Sure, he could still get his revenge just by reporting Peter or killing him in secret, but that wasn't good enough for Jack. He still remembered the embarrassment he received last time when they had taken both the students right in front of his very eyes. "You think you can make a fool out of me?" he shouted. "We'll see that the fighting event isn't over yet. You think your little experiment is strong, huh? Well then, let's see how well it does against a real opponent." When his voice could be heard back at the booth, Jack started to laugh hysterically down the long corridor. "Some people in this world shouldn't have the power they have," Owen said out loud and clearly, making sure everyone had heard what he had said in the booth. "Does that include you?" Bernie asked. Owen shrugged his shoulders. "Who knows?" The event had come to a close for the day, and there were several surprises. The audience was excited to return to see everything tomorrow, and the students, who hadn't taken part in anything, were restless. When they had all returned to the competitors' room, they were eager to go out on the platform for the evening to expend all the energy they had pent up. Quinn and his group had decided to meet up at one of the coffee stalls. It was a little bit late for coffee, but they wanted to discuss the possibilities that might happen to Peter, as well as update everyone about what had happened so far with Cia. They hadn't invited Sam this time, so they could talk freely, but did, however, plan to meet him tomorrow to watch the rest of the events. Quinn was the last one to arrive at the coffee shop, and sitting outside was Logan, Layla, and Vorden. As he walked up and took a seat, he noticed one was empty. "Huh? Where's Fex?" "He said he wasn't feeling well tonight and would join us a little later," Vorden replied. The truth was, Fex had a prior appointment tonight. On the very top of Hotel 4, if one was to look closely, they still wouldn't be able to see anything, but perhaps if one had a pair of binoculars, they would be able to see two figures. It was windy up at the top, but it was away from the eyes of any type of camera and was in a place that would have been hard to reach for many. "Let me ask you something, dear brother," Silver said in a sarcastic tone. "Did you know about the illegal?" After the fighting event had ended, the participants had been taken to the medical office to have their wounds taken care of. Even those who hadn't received any major injuries still needed to have a quick checkup done to them. For once, Haley was pleased that she wasn't one of the only doctors in the whole place, and it seemed like the rest had everything handled. She felt like it was one of the most leisurely days in her life, but perhaps she had said that too soon. In the middle of checking up on all the students, she had been called over to check up on one of the students from their military base. However, it wasn't one of the students who had taken part in the fighting tournament, as she had first thought. When she entered the hospital-like room and turned around the corner, she was surprised to see a short-haired, purple female student. "We don't know what's wrong with her," one of the nurses said as they took Haley around the corner. "It seemed like she can't remember anything, her name, where she's from, what day it is. She's in a major shock and we don't know what to do. That's why we decided to call you over." After being updated about the situation by the nurse, Haley knew this wasn't going to be an easy one. For some reason, it seemed stranger events than usual were happening this year. The female nurse had left the room to leave Haley alone with the student, while she carried on to perform her other duties. As she left the room, she bumped into a man wearing the same type of scrubs as her. It was a male nurse. "Is everything okay there?" the man asked. The female nurse then looked around to see if there was anyone else down the hallway before spilling the student's details. The man looked concerned after hearing the information and wished her a speedy recovery. The man continued to walk down the hallway and placed his hand by his ear. "This is Agent 66. I have an update on the situation." Inside the pure metallic base, Agent 5 was sitting at her desk in quite a small spaced room. She continued to twiddle her fingers on the table as she thought about what to do. She finally stood up from her seat and opened up a digital display with all sorts of photos and numbers on the screen. As she moved her hand slightly above the pictures and words, they would move with it. "Agent 100 is no longer answering her communicator. According to Agent 66, she did as asked and dropped out of the first-round tournament, but due to the events surrounding Agent 72, we no longer know if the information was received or not. The question is, why is Agent 100 no longer answering her communicator?" She then lifted her hand and brought up Agent 72's information. Beside it, there was a photo of Cia. "With her memories being completely wiped, Agent 72 is as good as dead to us. We have no clue whether they were able to get anything out of her or not. Perhaps it might not be the best idea to go ahead with the attack after all." It was a tough decision, and it was all up to Agent 5 to make. She closed down the holographic display and went back to her seat. "I've decided this operation is too risky. We will no longer plan to attack the event." A decision had been made. On the rooftop of Hotel 4, the two figures were the only things standing there. The wind continued to blow up an intense high in the sky. "Illegal? Who's done something illegal? This is the first time I've heard of such a thing," Fex replied nervously. He couldn't even look directly at his sister and continued to peer out of the corner of his eye to see what type of face she was making. When finally their two eyes met, he regretted it instantly as it looked like a demon. "No more games, Fex. This has become a serious matter now," Silver replied. This was it. He couldn't hide this from his sister, and he had already expected a result such as this one to happen. Knowing full well what was going to happen, he had already decided what he would do. He was never going to give up his blood brother Quinn. He saved his life, and in return, he would save his. "Did you create that thing?" she asked. "No," Fex replied in a composed voice this time, to show this was no laughing matter. When I arrived, I discovered the illegal. At first I thought one of the 13 families had created it, but after realizing it was a Wight, I realized its master must have been close. I kept a close eye on who that could be, and finally found out. This piece of information needed to be revealed to her. The important part of Fex's plan was he needed Silver to stop looking. Sooner or later, she would have gone looking and found Quinn by his smell. "Oh, since when did Fex become a little detective?" Silver replied. "The law states we can kill illegals on the spot. If we know the creator is in the school, then let's finish off the illegal and return with the vampire." An expected response. His sister was quite predictable because she always followed the rules and tried to deal with things the quickest way without getting others involved. This little piece of insider information was the only thing he could rely on. Suddenly, Fex went down on one knee and placed one of his hands on the ground. He made sure to keep his head facing the floor to show the appropriate respect. This was something that vampire only did to leaders, or lower ranks did to higher ranks. Although Silver was technically a higher rank than Fex, due to their positions within the family, he had never done this to her before, and it all came as a surprise. "Please, Silver, let me deal with the illegal, and I promise I will bring the vampire back to you tonight. You know I wanted to stay on Earth as long as possible. The truth was, I knew the family would send someone after me sooner or later. After I found an illegal here, I've been making notes and tracking the vampire and them down. I thought when they would take me back if I also handed them in, there was a chance my punishment could be made lighter. I could use it as an excuse as to why I stayed here so long. Please give me till the end of tomorrow, and I will bring them both to you." A part of what Fex had said was the truth. He had planned this. He just never thought his sister would be the one to get him. If he returned with the shadow vampire user, then his punishment would have been light. Silver thought about this for a while. Fex had broken a severe rule, but not enough to be put into internal slumber, but there was a chance he could be put into temporary sleep for hundreds of years. She would hate to be apart from her brother for so long. If Fex caught these criminals, then there was a chance the punishment could be lightened. "All right, I agree with your request, but 2 things," she said. "1, not tomorrow. You need to do everything tonight." "Tonight? But that's too soon. Guards are protecting the—" Fex said worriedly. "If you can't do it tonight, then I will do it myself tomorrow. This will be a test for you, and the second thing, the vampire must be brought to me, but the Wight must be eliminated." He knew this was the best he was going to get, and in a way, it was a better result than he had expected. "Fine, I shall bring the vampire to you and kill the Wight," Fex answered. The 2 of them quickly vanished, and now there was no longer anything on the roof. It was as if nothing was ever there.
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.